Well, regional Victorians are urging Premier Daniel Andrews to implement a ring of steel around Melbourne to allow regions currently with no evidence of COVID to remain open. The small communities right across these areas are struggling, especially after they were placed into another lockdown based on sewage detection that turned out to be false. Joining me live now is Dr Anne Webster, the federal member for Mallee. And thanks so much for your time. You've written to Daniel Andrews. Have you had a reply?
No, but to be fair, I did send it to him yesterday. Thanks very much for having me, Laura.
My pleasure. Yeah. What are you calling for? What have you asked for in this letter, and what's the justification for leaving the regions out of it?
Look, the justification is that Mildura and Horsham, for example, in my electorate of Mallee, have proven that they are willing and able and committed to doing the right thing when there is evidence to do so. What we have is this perpetual state of lockdown occurring for regional Victoria when Melbourne has cases. As you rightly said, Premier Andrews announced last week that because of tracing in Wangaratta, all of the regions needed to be locked down. Well, that proved to be untrue. And in fact, we are still in lockdown because Melbourne has some cases. Look, nobody's denying the seriousness of the Delta strain. However, what we need is a ring of steel. And I noted that the Premier was quite committed to the New South Wales Premier to be able to do that around Sydney, but what we need is for him to do it around Melbourne.
So going back to the ring that was around Melbourne last year, is that the kind of circumstance you're calling for?
I think it needs to be tighter than that even. You know, we know that there are many roads that lead out of Melbourne. We want the Premier to utilise his capacity to put police on all of those roads. And if necessary, if he doesn't have the personnel, then to call in the ADF. The Commonwealth has stood firm in offering support. So the fact of the matter is that regions should be able to get on with our lives. If there were tracing in sewage, which he's got a line of sight on, I certainly don't. If there was tracing, then certainly testing and contact needs to occur in the towns. And only when there are cases should localised towns be locked down.
Okay, well, we're looking at 11 cases today, all but one. Only one was in quarantine, so there were 10 infectious in the community. You are looking at these numbers just like all of us. Can you see this lockdown ending anytime soon?
I fear that it won't. I fear that the aim for zero is a commitment that the premiers have made. And what we need is a proportionate response. We need a measured and a targeted response. And we're not seeing that.
Well, just before I let you go, we're now 18 months into the pandemic. We all see these heartbreaking stories about family members unable to travel over borders to see sick family members. They're not given exemptions. I mean, surely this needs to be sorted out this far in, where you have protocols in place so this kind of heartbreak doesn't go on.
Oh, look, I agree, Laura. It is devastating for these families, you know, and they are the cases. There are cases that I've been trying to support in the last few weeks for people to have cancer treatment in Adelaide. Fortunately, finally, this particular woman was able to get the surgery she needed to remove a tumour the size of a football. If you can imagine the stress of that, no family. And by herself, but the effort to have her see her specialist and go through with that surgery was, I mean, honestly, it does your head in.
Yeah, certainly. And the Prime Minister said he'd speak to the premiers in a national cabinet setting about this a couple of weeks ago. Do you have a better read on why there can't be, you know, more streamlined protocols?
No, I don't. I absolutely do not. I am concerned that we will be facing these challenges, and the fact that South Australia does not have a cross-border commissioner, as we have in Victoria and as New South Wales has, is a problem. You know, to have a particular person over there who has the clout to be able to advocate and to streamline some of the SA Health and SAPOL issues would be very helpful. But in the meantime, it's a lot of work to support families and to support individuals to be able to live their lives, albeit in an incredibly restricted way.
All right, Dr Anne Webster, let us know when you do get that reply from Daniel Andrews. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks, Laura.